Among the many challenges of doing solo RPG is finding games that can be played with a minimum amount of material and not having to bring in tons of supporting books and tables and charts and things like that. And also finding rule sets where the stats themselves are intended for one PC so that the encounters you have with enemies from the existing rule set are more or less balanced. Sacrifice is something that answers those questions, although it is not in and of itself a solo RPG. It comes with GM-less rules and tools, and we're going to talk about the ways in which these can be used. In this video, I'm going to go over a little bit of the structure of what the game is, although I'm not going to spend most of my time just paging through the book explaining the mechanics because they will be pretty familiar, and they are a D20 base with modifier rule set. But I will talk about that a little bit. Mostly I want to show you I've begun to play the game, and I want to walk you through what I've done, and I've committed myself to playing the game just from the materials in this book and the GM-less rules and tools, and that's it. I think I might have rolled once on this commoner fold-out, which is a way to quickly make characters who are not your main heroic character, and we'll talk about what that means in the context of this game, but this is not needed because I wanted to show you really how much this offers in and of itself. And if you're thinking of, particularly if you're thinking of getting into solo RPG and want to try something that is a regular rule set with solo support where you don't have to buy a ton of other stuff, this is going to be something you might want to take a look at. It is published by Black Oath it's published by LFOSR and Black Oath Entertainment, Black Oath Games, and it is written by Alex T. And I will say at the outset of the video that you can look at the credits here. Alex is also the author of one of my favorite games, Disciples of Bone and Shadow. I did this on the channel, and I'll put a link to that right up here. I recently bought the fuller edition of that game, the Conquered Sun edition, and I am thinking about doing some video on that at some point, but I have already done a video on that. I've also done a video on his other game, Seekers Beyond the Shroud, and I looked for my copy of that game and I couldn't put my hands on it, but I have done a video on that as well, and you can see the link to that video up here. So I do love his work. And LFOSR is a publisher, and he is also the publisher of my book, A Place Underground, which is a literary dungeon roll table, as well as an essay about dungeon theory. So I do have a relationship to the publisher of this book. So those are my disclaimers out of the way. That said, that's not why I love this game. This is a very approachable game in a world of betrayal and sacrifice. You play a heroic character that is branded, and you are, as the branded, you are no ordinary mortal. You have escaped certain death. And while the forces of evil are powerful, as is the Holy Church and its Inquisition, so is your will to live. Your determination and resilience in the face of certain death sets you apart from the common man. So in this particular case, with these materials that I had, I did something I don't usually do, which is I started making my character. And indeed, I started using the tables in Sacrifice for name generation, and I just kind of looked and I got something I liked, Ingwall Vogel, and it indicated that this was a name that came from people who lived in the Kingdom of Bavaria. And so looking at this map, I just decided that my character was going to be sort of at this nexus, the borderland of the no man's land and the kingdom, and that there was going to be some kind of, I guess, borderland theme or something of that nature. And then based on character creation, the character details here, my character flaw was wrath. And the reason that one of my motivations was that I had been betrayed by a protege. And I rolled on the spark tables in the book to start with. I don't know if you can read or see this, but I got defending peace from the included spark table. And then I went to the table that is going to tell you what is your kind of next area that you're traveling to, because this is an overland kind of setting. And I realized what I neglected to do was write down the pages of the tables, so for easy reference here. But there is a basic chart that's going to tell you where you're traveling to next, and here it is. So we rolled up that we were traveling to a civilized place, and I went to the civilized encounter table, and I got right away something that then kind of set me in a different direction. I rolled up that there was a wandering merchant, and I thought to myself, he claimed to have all sorts of potions, and his motivation that I rolled up from the NPC motivation and description table was something that he was motivated by hatred, and his affect or his way of being was difficult. So putting this together with what I already knew about my character, I decided that this wandering merchant was going to be aiding me in some way, or seeing me as the vessel that he could help in my quest, and that I tried to get him to help me rolling on the table interaction table, but he was indifferent to that help. So I didn't get help, but he did he did toss something my way, and it was a biscuit. Again, getting this from a table in the book. And then he said to me, "Give this to the rat catcher, who will be grateful and grant you access to the depths of the castle when you can get hired as a servant and infiltrate the royal house that way." So the rat catcher came again from the tables here, and I decided the combination of that with the biscuit was something. It's administering poison in some way that is going to be given to somebody who works in the depths of the castle, who's going to then let me get in there. And he also gave me a warning. And the warning was to watch out for the wretched wolves. This is a band of mercenaries who are traveling in the area. They're going to try to take this poison, and if they did this biscuit, and if they discover it, they're going to, well, I wrote here, force you to tell them where I am, but actually probably just force me to eat it and I would die. And the concept of traveling mercenaries in this land, again, comes from a table here that is the mercenary table, and you can create there are tables to create the names, the random mercenary name, and they are traveling through the no man's land. And there are also some tables for what their own motivations are. So here's a look at one of these. This is the NPC motivation table, the D100, as well as the descriptor table. And also in the GM list rules and tools, you get two tables that pair together for actions and theme. And so it's these tables that I'm working with to inform the narrative here that I'm developing. So basically, I have been almost, the biscuit itself was almost made it feel comical, but the rat catcher gave me the link to this concept that there's some guy that works in the bottom of a castle somewhere protecting, but he can be bribed, and he's going to be bribed with a special poison biscuit. And so but then as I'm given a warning, and the warning is to watch out for the wretched wolves, this mercenary band. So I set out on day one, rolling on a weather table. The weather is hot. I have rations, but I might not have enough, so I might have to do some foraging for them. And there are rules here to do orientation checks, meaning, are you going to be going in the direction that you planned to be going in, or if not, are you going to be lost? And if you're doing the check, depending on whether you have a guide or you're on the road or you're in a mountain, there's a different difficulty class to pass the check, and indeed I failed. So then if you fail the check, you have to roll for a mishap, which I did. And I came across an area that was littered with traps, and I rolled up that there were remnants of fire snakes in this trapped area. And so I decided the first thing I wanted to do was I looked up fire snakes here, and I got them on a random roll, and then I looked up the fire snake in the book, and reading the description of it, it says that their special ability is they have this burning skin. They excrete a toxin through their skin that burns to the touch. And if you're in contact with it, you receive d6 fire damage. Well, the fact that I found these fire snakes' skins sort of left over in these traps told me that I wanted to I'm getting this theme of toxins and poison. I wanted to attempt to recover these skins to make some kind of poison, or perhaps to also add them to the offering of what I'm bringing to this rat catcher. So I attempted to do that, and I searched around to get to get the snakes themselves, and I decided that was an easy attempt because they basically were right there. And I had a benefit in my own as my character has, one of the benefits that my character has is heretical knowledge. And heretical knowledge is described as a skill that there are things lurking in the darkest, foulest corners of the human world. This skill allows a character to identify and know details concerning the enemies of humanity, demons, and other terrible creatures that corrupt and stain anything they touch. So I decided that that was sort of relevant to a poisonous fire snake, and I was, based on that, adding that modifier in, able to forage for the snake skins and have therefore the poison of their that they excrete. And then I did a poison save to see if I was injured while I was kind of trying to make this or extract this, and I passed that, so I was not injured. I did a further search on the fire pits to see if there was anything else there aside from those snake skins, and there was not. And then finally, leaving that area, I decided I needed to do a dexterity check to see whether the traps were in any way still working, that, they might further injure me. And while I succeeded in that, I just kind of barely got out of the way of those traps. And so that was the first part of my day. The rules tell you that each day is divided into 3 parts, and you will be deciding how much time you're spending in each part of the day. And then at the end of that day, you will need to, depending on what rules you're using, you will need to make camp, you will need to consume some rations, and you will need to mark off that time is passing. So in that case, that was kind of the first. This took the first portion of my day. I didn't say how much time per se, but I continued on then traveling, rolling on, following the procedures in the book to roll to see kind of where I was going next, what type of hex I was going into next. And this is a good moment to pause and say that while I have this great map here from Outdoor Survival as the backdrop to the video, I didn't actually use this in terms of what I had been doing. I think that, however, one could very effectively do this, and I had some thought initially, depending on how I was going to make the video. You could see here there's some numbered areas of kind of rolling a d6 to see where I started, and then actually using a roll to see where I was going and kind of correlate what's on this map to what I might find in the sacrifice book. The reason that I didn't do that was as I said, I'm trying to do something that is just simply using the material that you can get from this book as well as the GM list tools, because I know that in a lot of videos I start pulling in lots of different things and people wonder and ask, well, how can I do that unless I have all these different things? So everything here, as I said already, is just from this book and the supplement, the GM List Rules and Tools supplement. So moving on. We rolled up a wilderness hex, and then I went to the Oracle to ask, is there going to be some type of encounter here? Because I wanted to, effectively randomize that. And I just gave it a 50-50 chance, and I gave it a roll, and I rolled a 10. So indeed, there would be, based on this Oracle, an encounter here. So I went to the wilderness hex encounter table in the book and rolled on it, and what I got was a 20, and a 20 in that case was combat. So what is the encounter? It's combat. And then I rolled, well, what am I encountering? And amazing as it sounds, I rolled another 20, and I got that I was encountering a wolf. Now, it's actually this table, but it's still a 20, a wolf. So I thought to myself, this was really connected. This was a sign connected to the wretched wolves remember that mercenary band that I was warned about at the outset by that wandering merchant with a kind of gleam in his eye. Watch out for the wretched wolves. So I wondered if the wolf was a lookout for that mercenary. Maybe it was a signal that they were in the area. And I decided that if I tried to just have combat and fight it and kill it, that would be a bad thing to do. So I decided to try to charm the wolf instead, to try to interact with it in a non-combat way. And to do that, the first thing I did was I took the NPC table and rolled on it to see what its disposition would be. Now, of course, it's not an NPC. It's a beast. It's a wolf, but I'm going outside of, this was fit my story that perhaps it was a lookout, or I just decided it was. I could have gone to an oracle to tell me if I wanted to. I could have gone to the oracle and I said, is it? Well, maybe it's likely that it is, and give it a roll, but I just decided it was. But its position was indifferent to me. So I tried to offer it some food, and I did a charisma check to see if I could get it to take my food, and it did. I barely passed that, but it did take my food cautiously. And then I rolled on the spark table to see what might happen next, or to give myself some direction, and I got guide enemy. So I said, wow. So perhaps the oracle or the wolf is going to lead me to these mercenaries. And then I did ask that question on the oracle table, and it said that it was likely it would lead me. So I followed the wolf around. I just waited there for a bit. And then I went to the solo rules and I rolled for a complication. And there's a complication table here. And I just did that because I wanted some external direction. And I rolled a 6, which says the social environment changes. And so I interpreted that to mean that I did get to the mercenary camp, that I was going to have some other human interaction in my story. All characters in this world that are not beasts are humans. So I got to the mercenary camp. I rolled NPC motivations, and I got the motivation of justice and a descriptor of respectful. And then I went to the action and theme table and I got evade and death. So I tried to interpret this, and the way I interpreted this, it's practically impossible for me to read my own handwriting, but if you can, here it is. That the mercenaries are wary of the corrupted urban castle, and they appreciate my efforts to infiltrate it and take out the evil demon who is masquerading as a prince. They tell me that if I travel further in a certain direction toward the Rocky Hills, I might find a valuable artifact. And the words that I underlined are words that I came up with by rolling on various tables in the book. And the artifact is something called a veil piercer. It's a rough stone with a spiral inlay, which pierces the veil between life and death and can absorb 10 damage a day. But the next day after it, then I will be getting extra damage. And all of this is described in the rules. There's an artifact table with some descriptions of artifacts. And the question then is, will I search for it? I did a roll on the Oracle table. It's very likely, as I am attracted to the borderlands. And you may remember at the outset, I said that for whatever reason, in looking at this map, I decided to start out at the borderland between where I was from, Bavaria, and the no man's land. So the concept of something that is living between life and death is something that is attractive to me. So I think I am going to set off in search of that and turn toward the Rocky Hills. And that, I decided, ended my second portion of the day. And then I rolled to see where I was going, and I got another civilized hex there. And I rolled then to see if there would be an encounter, and I got a very likely. So I traveled on, and it was a pretty eventful day. I entered a small settlement with corpses hanging from street roofs, most of them with signs of that they were likely traders. Again, all of that coming directly from a table in this book. So I decided that I was going to seek rest for the night at an innkeeper who turned out to be eccentric but benign. I paid D8 coin for the room. I just decided I needed to pay for that, and I settled in for the night. And that concluded my first day there. So now on the next day when I wake up, I'm going to need to go. I think I'm going to be doing a search for that artifact and deciding where it might be and how it might help me in my quest to infiltrate this castle. Perhaps I will roll on some of the spark tables with NPC interaction to see if I can find somebody who will maybe direct me toward the castle. Or perhaps I could roll on the Oracle table and decide, is this castle even right here? Is this am I in the civilized area where the castle is? I didn't really roll up. There are some tables here to decide how big a settlement is or anything like that. I didn't get that far right now, but that's something, because I felt like a lot had happened and I was pretty tired. So I just found a place to stay for the night. And when I wake up in the morning, there's lots of possibilities for me. So a few final thoughts here on Sacrifice now that I've given a little bit of a demo of how my story is setting out. And I think you can see from what I've done so far that there's just a lot of different directions that I can go. And I think for me, I have a feeling like I'm going to be waking up the next day and then have this array of possibilities of in which direction my story is going to develop. And that is, I think, the sign of source material that is generative enough to support that kind of story development on your own. And that certainly is offered here in a pretty small package. Just a few things to point out. I glossed over the basic rules because I think those are, in a sense, the least interesting of what's going on here, not in a bad way, but it's based on the D20 system. As such, it's compatible with a lot of other D20 systems with a difficulty class that you are trying to achieve. The character creation, the attributes are 3d6 with basic attributes that you recognize: strength, intelligence, wisdom, dexterity, etc. And there are an option to take a particular extra benefit because you are an extraordinary hero. So you could have titanic strength or lightning reflexes, unbreakable will, or boundless vitality, and that is going to give you a change to that basic ability. And then there are skills that you get to take. And in this game, you start out as level 3. This is something I really like. It's something I do most often when I play, to give my character, particularly when it's just one character, something extra. Often you get benefits at higher levels in terms of skills or feats or things you can carry or whatever. And so I want to add that on. But here it is said that you start out at level 3. So you get to choose some various skills. And we already saw my use of heretical knowledge that I had chosen. And there are a whole bunch of other types of skills that you could have that would help you in the world. And many of them are thematic to this type of environment. For example, religion, that the church being the most powerful institution, and here you can have specific knowledge about that, so some benefit there. And then you also have some combat feats that you could choose at a certain level. So you can, for example, have lucky fall, that when you fall from a height that would normally kill you, you could spend your luck to avoid harm. And I'm sorry, that's actually just a regular feat. The combat maneuvers are what they're called, that you can choose at certain levels where you get a certain benefit in combat. And I'll say one thing that this rule set does very well is to flesh out combat, so that there are not only these types of combat maneuvers that you're given a certain number of stamina based on, I think it's based on Constitution, I can't remember, and you can expend that in the course of combat to use one of your feats. So for example, if you had combat awareness that would cost 4 stamina, it lets you make a perception check when a creature makes attack against you, and it can turn that attack into a miss if your result is higher than the attack roll. So there are a whole bunch of these things that you can potentially have to add to combat. And combat itself also has tables that will provide some variation in what happens. There's tables for critical hits that are bludgeoning, what actually happens. So it adds some flavor, that there's a strike to the leg and then the target is going to be moving at half speed until it's healed. Or perhaps you take a wide swing so the attacker can make an additional attack to the nearest enemy. There is a critical hit table for a bomb or a spell-like effect. So there's perhaps nerve damage, which becomes triple damage, or somebody can become stunned and can't attack for D10 rounds. There's a table for a critical hit slashing, for piercing. There's a fumble table that if you roll a natural 1 during combat, you're going to fumble and then something is going to happen. And it could be something like a random item falling from your bag. So when you put all this together, it becomes very cinematic. And the tables are here for you if you want to add this in. And if you don't want to add this in, you don't have to add that in, but it is there. Additionally, types of injuries, permanent wounds, fatigue, very, very well fleshed out. We've already gone through the basic travel procedures that I talked about, and the various actions are all laid out for you, that you could have to make camp, forage, hunt or fish, an exploration procedure. And we looked at the mishaps tables that can occur. There's also a mishap table that can occur when you're making camp. Now, at the end of my day, I was in a settlement, so I just decided I was going to go pay some money to stay somewhere. But if I had been out in the wilderness, then perhaps this camp mishap table would come into play. And there's likewise just a general traveling mishap table. There is a table for the meta table for encounters, whether you have an event, what is the event? Is it a finding? Is it a creature encounter, an NPC encounter? So you can see how the provision of all these tables and the type of creature table that it is will allow enough structure for you to play solo. There is this NPC initial disposition table as well that we used when we encountered the wolves that were sort of indifferent to us. So there's a lot of structure here in the form of these encounter tables that will allow you to develop your own story. And these are encounter tables for being out in the wilderness, the battlefield, or perhaps you're encountering something in a war-torn area. And then on top of all of that, you have the spark tables, the motivation and the descriptor in the main book, as I've already shown. And you have the action and theme table in the solo support. And then finally, you also have an adventure seed table. Now, I did not use this. It's a D20 table. You could indeed start here to get a whole adventure seed for yourself. And just a whole bunch of tables. Factional events, natural events, general events that are contained in a small package. The one thing I will say that was as a caution is that when it says at the outset that the rules are designed for one, it's best played with a GM and a single PC, I expected the beasts to have their stats and amount of them appearance to be modified or scaled for one PC. But indeed, with the wolves, for example, now wolves travel in a pack, of course. When you look at the wolves, I decided that it was a lone wolf because as I was telling the story, it was just the lone wolf. But when I looked it up to see how many possibly could be in the pack, we find, let's see, where is it? That you could encounter in your pack 3d4. So I gave that a roll just to see what I would get, and I actually got 10 wolves on my 3d4 roll. So had that, now I understand wolves travel in a pack, but had my single PC tried to encounter and fight 10 wolves, I'm not really sure that would have gone so well. And so that's like, for example, pilgrims, 10d10 you could encounter, or 3d10 mercenaries. Those numbers seem very high to me, but you could just obviously adjust that. If you encounter d12 trolls on your own, that could be an issue. So that's the one thing that I found to be slightly off in terms of scale. I don't see that there's anything that I'm misreading here in terms of that's what that means, or a suggestion of modifying that. But that's just something that you would need to work out on your own, as is often the case when dealing with stats for things that might more naturally be encountered by a party of 4 or 3, 4 or more. So that was just the one thing that felt a little bit off to me in here. The GMless rules, as mentioned, they are slim but essential, and everything that's here is really all you need. The general Oracle table, we looked at the complications and the action and theme. There are a few other things, some combat actions here. It says, in order to simulate an opponent's decision-making process, you can use these tables. So if you are encountering something, it is at full health, and you want to know what it's going to do, you can roll a D10 and just see that it's going to attempt to corner you. Or if it's at 50% or less health, what it's going to do, well, on a 1 to 2, it'll do a standard attack, but maybe it will do an alternate attack if it has one, if you roll that. And when its health is very low, if you rolled an 8, it's going to flee. So this is going to give you some help in determining the the combat, so it's not just fight, 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 and then it automatically is to the death. And then the same thing with encounters. You can roll on here to learn what the initial reaction of an encounter might be. So, for example, if you're rolling the d10 here and you got a 1, within that you could determine and see, is this thing going to attack you? Is it going to leave? Or maybe it's going to be friendly. So you get some supporting material, and you can see you don't need a lot. You really don't need a lot, and yet it is enough. So that's a look inside Sacrifice. It can be played super effectively with just on your own with just these 2 books, and the addition of the Commoners foldout will give you the possibility of bringing some regular characters with you if you want, or just some PCs that you can encounter, but it will give you stats to roll up some accompanying people that can travel with you in your heroic state to help you out.